Hello, my name is Rachel Kamala of Nemertes Research. Welcome to our monthly webinar entitled Video Conferencing Everywhere, Keys to Success by Nemertes Research Analyst Irwin Lazar. This webinar consists of an interactive presentation and moderated Q&A period. To submit a question, please use the control panel on the GoToWebinar. If you experience any technical difficulties, please contact webinars@nemertes.com. Upon conclusion, you will be presented with a short survey. Please answer the questions to provide feedback on this webinar and content for future webinars. We also ask if you'd like to participate in our research. In exchange for your participation, you will receive access to our research. A replay will soon be available for viewing on our website. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn it over now to Irwin Lazar.
Great. Thank you, Rachel, and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where all of you are today. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. I'm excited to share some of our most recent research around video conferencing. I'll spend a couple of minutes as go up to the agenda here, spend a couple of minutes talking about Nemertes, who we are, what we do, for those of you who are unfamiliar with us, and then we'll share some of a study that we recently conducted, and I'll get into the details of that study in a little bit. Suffice to say, we looked at video conferencing trends, focusing on video conferencing in small rooms, use of cloud video conferencing services, and approaches for managing video conferencing. We'll pull out the keys to success as we go through the data points and share with you what actions organizations that participated in the study took that made them more successful than some other organizations. And then we'll talk about some of the future trends and some of the areas around video conferencing that are beginning to emerge and provide some feedback about what the participants found was important for them. So for those of you who are enterprise, IT executive, and user organizations, my hope is that what you pull out of this is essentially the ability to benchmark where you are with use of video conferencing to your peers, and for those of you who are selling products and services, hopefully we give you a little bit more insight into not only the state of the market, but what are people looking for and how are they making buying decisions. After we get through all that, I'll share some related research and provide some opportunity for Q&A and information about our next webinar and so on. So for those of you who are not super familiar with Nemertes, just to introduce who we are, what we do, we spend our time going out and gathering data from end user organizations by combinations of surveys and interviews and other means that we use to talk to live individuals and find out what they're actually doing. What are they spending their money on? How are they establishing strategies and architectures? What's important to them as they're making buying decisions? How do they rate their vendors? How do they rate different success factors as they look at strategies? So we'll focus here on the video conferencing. You can see in the topics we cover box on the left. We cover a lot of areas related to network infrastructure, foundations of digital transformation, digital technology, emerging areas like instrumented reality and some forerunner technologies. And then we work with our clients. Enterprise clients have access to our research. We work with them on strategy and advisory services. And then for vendors, we work with them on helping them understand the market, optimize go-to-market and product development campaigns, and if any of this research is applicable to and aligns with the kinds of messaging that they're doing, we provide content for webinars as well. Work with a number of different organizations, enterprise providers, media. Won't spend a lot of time here. And then just to give you a sense of the different technologies, as I mentioned, I lead our research coverage around unified communications and collaboration along with my colleague, Robin Garris. We all kind of contribute in the digital transformation space since that seems to touch everything. Also leading now our contact center and customer engagement areas. And I'll talk more about some of our other technologies when we get into our next webinar. So final commercial for Nemertes, we run an annual conference. This will be our 6th year of running it. It is focused on the foundations of digital transformation and how you get from digital transformation vision to digital transformation reality and how you define the value of digital transformation. So we'll be covering some upcoming research that we're in the middle of conducting right now, which will give you insight into successful digital transformation strategies, budgets and organizational approaches, where are organizations spending their money, how are they measuring success, what's driving their digital transformations. We'll share a lot of that at the conference, and we'll give participants the ability to learn from each other. This is very much an interactive, fairly smaller conference, roughly 40 to 50 senior level IT leaders is what we shoot for. And so not only are you hearing from us, but maybe more importantly, you're also having the opportunity to to learn from your peers. So if you're interested in attending that conference, please let us know. You can either reach out at some of the contact info I'll provide after, or you can go to Nemertes.com, click on events, and that'll take you to that Navigator 360 link, and you can see the agenda, speakers, and so on. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into video conferencing everywhere. So the point of this study, why have we done this? And this is now the second year that we've done this study. We're trying to follow and understand where we are in essentially a reality check around video conferencing. For years, going back to, I want to say the 1968 World's Fair, we heard the video conferencing was the next big thing. It's just right around the corner. You know, everyone's going to do video. The reality has not been quite what we expected. There is an awful lot of video out there. What we want to convey in this presentation is where are we today with video and what makes for a successful implementation. So we wanted to understand drivers for purchase. For those who aren't purchasing, why not? We really wanted to spend some time focusing on cloud video, and you'll see a fair amount of discussion on where the state is of cloud backend services to support video conferencing, and we'll define that in a little bit more detail later. We did a high-level cost study. You'll see some costs of supporting video conferencing in smaller rooms and different approaches and how they correlate with costs, how people measure ROI, value proposition, and some of the key features that are out there. What are buyers really looking for? What are they using to make their purchasing decision? So the way we did this, we went out to 132 end-user organizations in February and March via survey. These are screened participants, people that have either worked with us or participated in our research, have volunteered to participate, which I encourage any of you who are from an end-user organization who'd like to participate in our research, please do. We either usually give you a copy of the research. In this case, we provided an Amazon gift card to the folks who participated. We also work with a survey house to get some additional participants. So just to give you a sense of who the people are, about half of them were mid-sized organizations, 251 to 2,500 employees. A little under a quarter were small organizations, and roughly 25% were what we would consider large to very large. So those are the companies of over 2,500 employees. So pretty broad segment. And then for those of you who are clients of ours, as we go through any of these data points, if you'd like cuts, if you'd like to have any of the points we made correlated based on the size of the company, vertical, so on, please let us know. We can deliver that to you. So out of the 132 that we went out to that participated, only 5% had no video conferencing plans. A little bit of a self-selective pool of participants. You know, we build this as a survey on video conferencing, so you can sort of expect that if you're not doing video conferencing, you might not be as inclined to participate in this research. Although we did ask, even if you're not doing video conferencing, we'd like to hear from you. So only about 5% that had no plans, about 64% that we're using today, and we'll dive a little bit more deeply in a minute onto what the characteristics of those deployments is among the pool. Another 30%, roughly 29, that are planning for deployment in 2017. So at this point, there's not a whole lot of folks among these participants who have no plans for video or aren't using it all. For that 5% that said they were not using it, they really just didn't have a business case. Maybe they were small companies where everyone works in the same facility. They just don't really see a need for it. They just don't. People aren't asking for video. Those that have deployed video to at least half their meeting rooms, and we'll get into those numbers in a little bit more detail in a second. We wanted to understand the trend around workspaces and how that is impacting video conferencing. So we asked, what's your primary means now of provisioning? If you're running open workspaces, how do you provision a meeting space within that facility? So of those organizations that have open workspace environments, about 39% primarily provision small meeting rooms. About 21% throw a couch in the corner and say that's our workspace. And about 40% use a mix. So they use a little bit of both. And so as you think about where you might want to use video conferencing, it's obviously going to be a little bit more difficult to use it in that open workspace, couch in the corner, a table in an open area, as you see in this picture here. We do see a slight tick up in the use of open huddle spaces, up about 4% from a year ago. So that still tells you there's an awful lot of opportunity for video conferencing, even as companies move to more open workspaces. And then for those who are looking at desktop video conferencing within those open workspace environments, we see a lot of interest in some other research we've done around headphones that do things like noise cancellation to enable people to conduct a video call or an audio call for that matter, regardless of background noise and so on. So of the pool, we found about 65% have not rolled out a lot of desktop video conferencing. So what that says is 65.4% have rolled out desktop video to less than 5% of their employee base. Nearly half, almost 50%, said that they were increasing their desktop video rollouts. The small percentage of about only less than 5% that had rolled desktop video out to all employees or to more than half of their employees. And then a smaller group, 9.2, that's sitting in that 21 to 50. We found a success correlation here, and I'll recap all of these in a little bit, but let me just define how we evaluate success. It's essentially a self-rated metric. We ask organizations, the participants of the survey, how do you measure success? What are the factors that you look to? And typically it's business value, it's utilization, it's in some cases maybe travel reduction, so on. And then based on that metric, how do you rate the success of your video conferencing initiative? And then finally we ask, what would you do to improve success? And so then we look at that number of that rating number, that average rating, and we correlate it back to a variety of different questions that you'll see as we go through this presentation. So in this case, we did a correlation and we looked at how does success align with the penetration of desktop video, and we found that those who had rolled out desktop video to more than half their user base had the highest overall self-rated success for their video conferencing efforts. Not a huge amount, it was less than 10%, but at least you can see some correlation that the more you make video available, the more you kind of feel like your video initiative is delivering business value. Among small rooms, and we define these as under 5 seats, or 5 seats or less, I should say, we found that about 64% were increasing their rooms, meaning they were adding video conferencing to more of their small meeting rooms, and they were increasing at a rate planning on about a 60% increase over the next year. So that's a pretty big jump from a year ago when we did this study. A year ago, 32% were increasing, and they were increasing at a much smaller rate. About 2% said they were decreasing rooms, and the reason for that was generally people weren't using it, or desktop video was becoming a replacement, so they didn't really need the video in the rooms. And about 35% said no change. So overall, I think we validated again that there's growing interest in video conferencing, that people are beginning to roll it out, or continuing, I should say, to roll it out in increasing numbers, and that those that have extended video to the desktop are the ones that are seeing the greatest success. We asked what's driving that growth in video, and the biggest factor was just improving collaboration. Making it a better experience for people who are in different areas. All of you, I'm sure, have been in lots of meetings where if you're the person on the audio bridge, you're not really participating in the meeting a whole lot. You're hoping that you're multitasking. You're jumping in when you have to say something, hoping somebody listens to you. When you're on video and you can be seen and you can see the people in the room, it definitely improves that experience and makes for more effective distance learning. 44% say that their driver, and this was, you could pick more than one of the above. That's why these numbers add up to well over 100. 44% still say travel reduction is a primary driver for adding video. If you have more video, I don't need to see people in person as often. 41% company mandate. Somebody at the senior level says, we will use video. Everyone will be on video. 38% saying it's just getting easier to use. We don't have the obstacles. You don't walk in a room and get scared by a 200-button remote control like you used to a few years ago. And about a third employees demanding more of it. And then for those who aren't increasing, again, it kind of comes back to the lack of demand, lack of business case. People just, in certain environments, people just don't really see the need or want for video. Final factor here was increasing availability of lower cost systems. So the entry point for video, thanks to a number of different vendors that have entered at the lower end of the market, has really has lowered the barrier, and it's also brought down the price across the board. We looked at how do people provision video in these small rooms, and typically you see one of two approaches. One is they buy a laptop or a PC, they put a web camera on there, they install the client software, often running on Windows or Mac, and they don't really manage it as a device. And the beauty there is that they can run any app that they want. If they've got people in the company using Zoom and GoToMeeting and Microsoft Live Meeting and Cisco Jabber or other desktop video applications, they can run all of it and configure it all or they can even use like a planned Logitech type device using the NUC Intel-based mini, I don't call it mini computer, but sort of self-contained appliance computer that runs an instance of Windows that again allows you to run any kind of video system. So a lot more flexibility in that approach. The other one is the dedicated room system, which is, we're a Cisco shop, so we put a Cisco SX series in our meeting rooms, or we're Polycom, or we do Microsoft Link room system, or some other kind of camera. We'll talk a little bit more about this when we get into cloud as well. But that's usually where we're thinking about our video conferencing as a complete end-to-end system. We pick a vendor, we put rooms that match the desktop clients, and everyone gets the same flavor. So we find today that most people still go out and they buy a dedicated system. They go, they pick a video conferencing partner, provider, and then they buy a system that supports that. There is a correlation here that it's based on the vendor. So, Microsoft customers are more likely to use the PC approach, or use like the Logitech type system that I mentioned earlier, where Cisco, Polycom, life-size video customers are more likely to go with this kind of approach. And we did find that those who were using the dedicated system had slightly higher success, again, less than 10% difference, but slightly, some value, because when you have that managed system, often you get the capability to, or that dedicated system, you get that capability to do things like provide analytics, to know who's using the video system, to know how often it's being used, to do remote performance management, troubleshooting, and so on. We find instances where organizations who've rolled out laptops and PCs have run into issues where that laptop gets replaced with a new laptop that doesn't have the horsepower to run video, or they run into firewall, or I should say firewall, but antivirus capabilities, or not having a WebRTC enabled browser, and not being able to install a plugin, and lots of additional complexity that can often be introduced. We wanted to understand if the built-in camera that you find in almost all laptops and PCs these days is sufficient for video conferencing, or if organizations find that they need to make an investment in additional cameras, again, a variety of ones that are out there from different vendors, Logitech, Brio, and others. And what we found is most, 58%, say that the camera that comes with the laptop or PC is fine. That's all we need. About 27% say it depends on the use case. So in a meeting room where you might have more than 3, 4, 5 seats, you might want a wider angle, a better quality. If it's an executive, you probably want to give them a better camera. And then only 13% said that it's insufficient. So I think as you start to see more cameras coming on the market at lower price points, it might change that discussion, because my bet is that for a lot of people, they don't even really think that there are alternatives that are out there that can provide better quality to them. We looked at initial budgets. So this is what people told us they're budgeting on an annual basis, on a per room basis. So for capital cost, average about $3,600 to put video into a room. And this is, again, focusing on those small rooms. And what that capital cost includes is the cost of the endpoint, the cost of a screen, potentially a cost of a PC, cost of any other kind of functionality that might be required, whether that's a control panel, maybe changing lighting, furniture, anything you need to do to set up that room. And what we found is that the dedicated system was slightly lower capital cost. That actually, the red and green should be flip-flopped there. And the PC webcam was slightly higher at $54.91. The implementation cost, which we looked at the hours that are spent to set up these rooms, on average people budget about $2,600 employee cost, so that's hours times salary, or if they're using an MSP, what an MSP might charge them to set up a room. Again, I think I got my red and greens backwards, but what we're showing is the dedicated system came in a little bit lower. On the operational costs, again, the dedicated system was the lowest versus the PC webcam, and that operational cost includes support and includes licenses, includes maintenance, any other ongoing costs. So there you could expect the PC might require some additional maintenance to keep software revisions up to date and so on. Okay, so we looked at support models, and we found that most organizations were using managed service providers or internal, or a combination. So if you had the managed service providers, about 41%, and that correlated with a higher success. And either those that were using MSPs or using a combination of MSPs and internal resources had the highest success versus those that were trying to support these rooms entirely on their own. And I think that's an issue of scale, that as you add more rooms, you don't have a lot of resources to run around and fix those rooms, maintain them, or deal with troubleshooting and so on. So having some kind of third-party support model, especially if that could be a remote service, provides some additional value. We wanted to understand what was important to people as they buy. And so we asked this question in a way where we asked people to rate the importance of each one of these factors. And I presented this a couple of different ways, and I'm leaning toward this one being the most effective. If you look at the critical, what do people mostly look for? The most important factor, it actually came out to be wireless projection. But if you look at the average, what do people rate as critical, as nice to have, as somewhat unimportant, and as unimportant, and you kind of combine and you get those mean scores, we find that ability to control a screen from a phone. So you come in and your phone pairs with the screen and you can control it or initiate the session, actually had the overall highest average interest as an importance factor as you're picking a system and evaluating different vendors against each other's. Ease of deployment, can I send it out to a remote site, have them unpack the box, and away they go, came up as the second highest factor. Lower factors, having support for 2 screens, having a third party that is local that can come out and set up the system for me or troubleshoot it, came up a little bit lower. Analytics and reporting, an area I expect to see grow over time, and the ability to use that endpoint with multiple video services came out a little bit lower there. And low cost was slightly lower as well. So people aren't making their video conferencing decisions primarily on who's the cheapest endpoint, but they're looking at a variety of different factors. And the one that had the overall lowest importance was the ability to wirelessly project, meaning that if I'm sitting in the room and I want to share my screen, and I've got 4 people in the room, but we're not connecting to anybody outside the room, we just want to use the screen to show what's on my laptop, actually came out as the lowest overall average importance factor, meaning that people are it's a nice to have, but I'm certainly not going to complain if I have to just plug in a HDMI cable to share. And then we also looked at emerging features, and this is where the video conferencing vendors are trying to carve out new niches, new opportunities for themselves. So you're seeing features like embedded microphones and speakers in example of Cisco's latest releases. The ability to recognize and sync with users. So you walk in a room and some ultrasonic pairing happens, that your phone suddenly connects to the screen and you don't have to do anything to make that happen, versus in the previous one, maybe you had to start an app and get that up and running. We looked at immersive group collaboration, so Cisco SparkBoard, Google Jamboard, Microsoft Surface Hub, InFocus, MondoPad, Oblong, Mezzanine, and dozens of other, or more than a dozen now, products that provide this the ability to share content on either a single large screen or even across walls. We wanted to understand how important it was for video systems to integrate with those. The ability to actively track speakers, so something like Polycom Eagle Eye Director that can follow somebody around the room, or track somebody who, if people are from different parts of the table are talking to one another. We wanted to understand how important that was. We looked at 4K ultra high definition, the ability to use the system as a touchscreen system. So if my video endpoint supports touch, we wanted to see how important that was. And then finally, looking at voice commands. Can I walk into a room and say, start the video conference, or Alexa type functionality. So we found that the facial recognition, that ability to recognize somebody when they walk in the room, was actually what people were looking for. Have that ability for me to walk in, look at the camera knows who I am. A little spooky, but came out as the area that the people rated overall highest in terms of average importance. Voice recognition came up pretty high as well. So a lot of this speaks to that ability to improve ease of use of the systems. I talked earlier about what scared a lot of people away from video conferencing was the fact that when you walk in a room and you see a 25-button remote, there's a little too much complexity there. But if I walk in and the system recognizes me and says, "Hi, Irwin, I see you have a call scheduled for 2. Would you like to start it?" And I say yes, and away we go, and the system's up and running, and audio kicks in and everything else. That will hopefully make my experience a little better, even if it creeps me out. The touch screens in 4K, a little bit lower in terms of importance. Active speaker tracking came out even lower. As you can imagine, in a smaller room, probably not as important to track an individual. Embedded cameras, microphones, even lower than that. And immersive group collaboration came out the lowest at this point. Okay. So let me shift gears a little bit and talk about cloud video conferencing. So the way we've defined cloud and the way we defined it in this instance was a software as a service product service, software as a service, I guess, for enabling video conferencing interoperability and interconnectivity. So the idea here is that you're an organization who might have legacy Tamberg, Cisco, Polycom, Scopia, room systems. You want to enable those to integrate with whatever you might have on the desktop, whether that's, say, Skype for Business or Cisco Jabber or Spark or whatever, and then have that connect out to the outside world so that somebody can connect in via web browser. They're typically meeting-based, meaning they're scheduled meetings. There is a lot of overlap between the cloud video conferencing market and the web conferencing market. So we're using GoToWebinar here, which allows me to have a number of people, if I were using GoToMeeting, have people engage in video. So is that a cloud video conferencing service? Is Office 365 one? Yeah, I guess it definitely does provide video, but we were looking a little bit more at the platforms that are designed primarily to replace an MCU. So if you want to roll video out to everyone on the desktop, you want to incorporate video and integrate that into your room systems. The old way of doing it was spending millions of dollars on MCUs and putting those in your data center. The new way is you go to one of these number of vendors, and this is a small list. There are lots of others, Arcaden and others I probably should have had on there. But so again, I'm trying to focus a little bit more on the meeting-based services that are designed to integrate with the existing room systems. And then I just want to kind of highlight one point before I go too far off this is that these services are starting to now emerge with the ability to isolate video traffic on your network. So if I've got 5 different rooms in different parts of my company that are engaged in a conference, I don't want all of that traffic exiting my internet connections to go to some provider's backend and then coming back. I'd like to keep as much of that isolated on-prem as well. So video conferencing in the cloud has skyrocketed. From 2016 to 2017, we went from 31% using up to almost 40, with another 41% planning on using, and only 4% saying that they weren't. And those that were using it had significantly higher ratings of success, 89% versus those that were not using it, that small group. And I think what this says is that cloud has become that elixir that allows companies to rapidly expand video to meet demand for it and to get it out, to get integrated with desktop, room, and outside video without having to make that huge capital investment up front. We asked people what kinds of endpoints do they use with their cloud service. Most people use what you would expect, a PC laptop or an existing room system. About 45% say that they're using systems from cloud providers, so that could be something like a Google Hangout, Chromebox, I believe the platform's called, or BlueJeans has an offering now, and other cloud providers that have bundled their own room systems to enable one-click or able plug-and-play connectivity into that system. And then we also looked at a few others, the Logitech Group Series, and there used to be a wider market there. Some of the companies like Tele have kind of disappeared, but that's sort of a universal type endpoint that would allow you to connect to multiple back-end services, but it isn't quite a laptop PC where you're taking a generic laptop and PC. In this case, it's more an optimized type device. That was the one that correlated highest with success. So those that were using the Logitech Group Series rated their overall video success highest. So let me wrap up with some keys to success. And what we found, the 4 ones that jumped out at us: having desktop, expanding video out to the desktop, making it ubiquitously available. It's the old, I believe it's Metcalfe's law, that the size of the network is the network, or is it the value of the network increases with the size of the network. The more people you connect, the more endpoints that can take advantage of video, the less video becomes something you have to schedule in advance and walk down the hall and go into a room to use. The more likely you're going to find that you're taking advantage of the benefits of video to improve virtual collaboration. Using dedicated systems in those rooms actually correlated higher with success. It is more restrictive, but it also, if you're picking a video conferencing vendor for an enterprise-wide deployment, having that dedicated system eases management costs, as we saw, and implementation costs. Using cloud, again, the cloud providers offer the ability to rapidly expand video to support either dedicated systems or PC systems, and to do so with usage-based billing, minimal upfront investment, and now increasingly even the ability to engineer traffic so that it doesn't overwhelm your internet connection points. And then final point that came out as a key factor of success was the use of managed service providers, so that you don't have to worry about getting up to speed on your own. Instead, you can rely on a third party to support the room systems to do things like troubleshooting and provisioning and maintenance and so on that's required. So I want to wrap up with what we have found historically in a number of our different research studies is a strong success correlation, and that's having an active program to encourage utilization. If you just roll desktop video out, if you just put video into small rooms and you don't tell anybody about it, you don't train them, and you don't, more importantly, sell them on the business value of using it, you're probably not going to have a very high rating of success. So we have developed what we call a user awareness and adoption methodology. And so it starts with the baseline of where you are today and what your goals are and how you get there, how you measure the success, evaluating the results of that success, and making adjustments along the way. And we have found that for those organizations that have a user awareness and adoption or user adoption initiative, it's collaboration that is the biggest driver. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with IT leaders in our interviews, benchmarks, consulting service engagements. There's always that frustration that I spent all this money to roll out this feature. I gave everyone desktop video conferencing and nobody's using it. Well, what have you done to drive adoption, to drive utilization, and most importantly, to map the benefits of what you're provisioning to the way that people work, so what their workflows and processes and personas are. We found that having a user awareness and adoption program strongly correlates with overall IT success, almost an 8 on a 1 to 10 scale, where 10 is the most successful versus a little under a 7 if they didn't have that program. So pretty substantial correlation of success there. And then finally, these are the areas that we're looking at in the future. We didn't ask about them because at this point, there's not a lot of deployment. Although I should say, reserve that we didn't cover them as much in this survey. We cover them in additional benchmarking that we do, where we go out and interview people and go to larger organizations primarily. So the factors that we think ought to be something that you're looking at as you develop a video conferencing solution going forward is first off is the use of those immersive group collaboration systems. We talked briefly about those. There's 10 or 15 of them. We did a webinar that's available on our website a couple of months ago, where we really dove deep into that market. And if you don't find it on our site, please feel free to contact us or reach out to me. I'll have my contact information at the end. Video platform as a service is starting to emerge, where you can take video APIs and embed video into your application. So you want to write a distance learning application that gives the instructor the ability to have either one-way broadcast video or two-way video. You want to do telemedicine, you want to build a kiosk, and you don't want to make an investment in an on-prem video platform. You can potentially buy the video capabilities you need and pay for those as you use them. So video.io, Sitecall are two examples in that space. And then the analytics piece is really a big area that we're starting to look at, which is how do you correlate the use of video with real value? So we say that video improves collaboration, but how do we measure that? We've talked to organizations that have done things like looked at salespeople and found that salespeople who are more likely to use video with their prospects have higher close rates than those that rely on phones. So that would be a really important metric to have, and we really want to understand what the impact is of video. So these are areas that we'll continue to look at. So let me wrap up with some related research, and we'll open the floor to Q&A. For those of you who are clients, these are all on our website. There's a larger deck of about 70 slides or so with much more detail from this study. As I mentioned, if you're a client, you'd like additional deep dive, you'd like to set up a call to review it in